Okay, now we are really going to get into the nitty-gritty. So strap yourselves in. We're going to look at all the blister preventions that can be applied to the posterior heel, or as many as I could think of, and exactly how they work. Apologies for this complicated slide, but essentially if I transpose all that or superimpose all that onto this magnitude, this mechanisms chart, we're going to look at coefficient of friction reduction strategies, lubricants, Engo patches, double socks, moisture wicking socks. We're going to look at pressure reduction strategies like donut pads, cushioning, foot strike angle. Both of these go together to reduce friction force. We'll look at materials that absorb shear like Pelitech pads, gel materials, and padded socks. We'll look at the adhesive materials that we can apply to the foot that spread shear load, and of course reducing bone movement. Okay, so we've seen these pictures before, and what I've done is I've added a dotted line in here just to give references to what's moving and what's not moving. All right. Lubricants and moisture wicking socks are a coefficient of friction reduction strategy that work at the skin sock interface. Now, it's easy to understand lubricants. You put like a Vaseline, for example, on your skin. It makes it slippery, and so your skin is able to move relative to the sock. Moisture wicking socks, the way they work is they are trying to negate the high friction effect of moisture on the skin surface. So they're trying to get that perspiration that comes from the skin and get it to absorb into the sock and through the sock, so it gets to the shoe and it either absorbs into the shoe materials like the lining or the insole, or is evacuated into the airspace of the shoe and ideally evaporates through the upper of the shoe. That's how moisture wicking socks work. Now, I think that you can appreciate whether you've used lubricants on your foot or not. Most people have used a moisture wicking sock. Lubricants make it slippery. They obviously make it slippery. I don't feel that my foot's that slippery when I wear a moisture wicking sock, even when I've been exercising for a while. So with each sort of mechanism, different strategies can work better than others, if you know what I mean. Engo patches, we've looked at this one, but I've drawn it in with the yellow line here. So the yellow Engo patch is it's adhered to the shoe, which is the blue surface. So there's no movement there. And what happens is because of the low friction surface of the patch, the sock is able to move up and down very easily. That releases the skin to move in sync with the bone at an early moment of time, thereby reducing the magnitude of shear deformation. Double socks. The idea here is that the lowest frictional interface is the sock-sock interface. So the normal sock is the pink one here. The second sock is the yellow one. So the second sock stays in stationary contact with the skin. The normal sock stays in stationary contact with the shoe. And there is slippage between the two sock layers. So that releases the skin to move in sync with the bone at an earlier moment in time, thereby reducing the magnitude of that shear deformation with every step. Pressure reduction strategies work by basically the harder things are pressed together, the higher the friction force. So if things aren't pressed together as hard, the lower the friction force. So the earlier we can get slippage at a material interface so that skin can move in sync with the bone. And it will happen at both interfaces, both the skin sock and the sock shoe interface. So all these cushioning materials, and I just want to elaborate on foot strike angle. So Doug, Richie and I were on the P3 podcast with Talisha, I don't know, six months ago, maybe more. And we were talking about my posterior heel blisters, and Doug suggested that stride length could have been an issue. And this kind of elaborates on why. As stride length increases, the foot strike angle will increase. Now, 35 degrees is probably a bit crazy, but it just really demonstrates it more clearly. The higher the foot strike angle gets, the more posterior the ground reaction force is applied, and it moves posteriorly more towards the posterior heel. So if you've got someone that is overstriding and struggling with posterior heel blisters, this is why shortening their stride length is probably a good idea, particularly given that heel strike is possibly the biggest factor, more than heel lift. Make sense? And thanks to healthystep.co.uk for letting me muck around with their image to show you that. Okay, shear absorption. Now, this is a bit different. We're not talking about frictional interfaces so much. We're talking about the give in the material, or the shear deformation that happens within the external material, not the skin. So here we've got a padded sock. So I've got a double thickness pink line here. The skin side of the sock remains stationary with the skin. The shoe side of the sock remains stationary with the shoe. And as the heel bone moves up, the skin is able to move up with it at an earlier moment because the sock itself undergoes shear deformation. And then the same in the downwards direction. If we look at a gel material, so that's the yellow, this is the gel applied to the skin. So the skin and the gel remain in stationary contact. The gel and the sock remain in stationary contact. There's nothing moving relative to one another here, except because of the deformation that occurs within the gel, the skin is able to move in sync with the bone at an earlier moment in time, thereby reducing the magnitude of that shear deformation with every step. This is gel applied to the shoe or a Pelitech pad. So again, these materials undergo shear themselves. So the pad is stuck to the lining of the shoe. The material is stuck to the sock as well. So there's no relative movement anywhere except there's give within the Pelitech pad or the gel material. Obviously, if the heel bone doesn't have to move up or down as far, then shear deformation magnitudes will be lower. And this is why potentially calf stretches and things like heel lifts and heel height differential on the shoe may be relevant. I can't say that I've noticed a correlation between people that have big trouble with posterior heel blisters and people that are tight in the calf muscle, but you can see the theory here.